Good morning! I'm gonna blame the meetups we all had in our booth at the demos during the technology and practice sessions when you listen to my voice. That's what I'm gonna blame. Let's not talk more about that. Great day yesterday, kicking off the second day. Let's see if we even more people here today. We don't know. The theme for the conference, Data Innovation Summit, is from data and AI transformation to decentralized data and AI value creation. Yesterday, we boiled it down to adoption is the quantum of innovation and value creation. Today, we're going to unpack decentralized, why we put that on the theme this year. Let's start with a bold statement. Decentralization is a survival tactic for a future in motion. Is that true? What do I mean? If we look at centralization, it's great for scalable ops, but it doesn't give as much market agility. It becomes rigid, it becomes stale. It suited us well when our productivity frontier was slower in moving forward. We could build an ERP system and we wanted to have it for 10 years at least. Then we can build systems in one way. On the other hand, on the other end of this scale, we have unstructured adhocracy. We have an organization, we have a way to build systems where we do everything as point solutions. Here we have extreme market agility, but it's not scalable at all. It's in this context where I want to frame decentralization and really more talk about decentralized federation as, trying to eat the cake and have the cake. So how can we go with the intention of both market agility and scalable ops? Decentralized federation. So decentralization, sometimes you see this as central versus decentralized, the bipolars. No. It's the middle ground we're going for here. And the challenge is, of course, is to avoid exponential coordination costs as we scale. Typically what happens, though, when we start doing things, we kind of fail to get this decentralization working, and in effect, we have devolved into unstructured adhocracy. The typical large enterprise today has a couple of big monoliths, and then they have point solutions all the way down to Excel. So we're living in hell from both ends. We have no scalability, and we have no agility. If we get it wrong. So let's go into this. I want to dive into this topic. What are the key mechanisms that makes decentralization work? I'm not going to go so much into the core federative part. I'm going to go into the fundamental idea of product thinking and product first ways of working. So product thinking, I'm going to frame it quite narrowly now on the stage here today to make a point. So a product is a composable and reusable interface between a provider and a market. So you're doing something that you want more than one to be able to use. Many years ago in a different lives, I had the opportunity to work when Ericsson introduced product lifecycle management. So they had from many years, 30, 40 years working in a project cycle, how they evolved their radio base stations or their products. And then in the end, the product was finished. Now we're going to be in operations. Around 2002, 3, 4, they introduced product lifecycle management as the core PLCM process across Ericsson. And I had the fortune to be part of that journey in a small, tiny bit, and I learned a lot. And what we were having, at some point, we asked questions. We were discussing, are we trying to be customer-oriented or market-oriented? Trick question. Customer-oriented for Ericsson meant we build something bespoke for one single operator, versus market-oriented to try to build something that more than one operator could use. So provider and market. Productization then, if I use the word productization, it's about thinking about how we interact in a large enterprise or with our end customers in a way that we are productizing these relations. Now, this is the kicker. Decentralization. What do we want to do with decentralization? We want to create an opportunity for interoperability and network effects. So the whole idea with decentralization is that in order to scale, we need to decentralize in order to be more nimble and fast. Fantastic. But if we can't have network effects, if we can't harvest and reuse from what is happening in different parts of the organization, we have an adhocracy. So decentralization, these interfaces put in different parts, is really important. Now, if you think about that, if everybody out there is doing their own interfaces, that's not going to work either. So this is where the federation part comes in. It's a point where we have platform. It's a point where we have a team topology with platforms and that serves more other tech teams that might serve an end customer. So this topic of product thinking relates to platform teams working towards their customer, domain teams working towards their customers. Not easy this to get right. So ultimately, decentralized ops should be about product first in the ways of working. And what we are trying to do is we're trying to get market agility and scalable ops. We're trying to get both. If we get that, we have now trying to see and think about how can we get value creation. We have a user, we create value for this user or this team. And on the other hand, how do we capture that value back into the enterprise so we build value, and ultimately we are working towards market adoption on the one hand side, and we're working towards capitalization, doing things cost effectively, doing things that scales. So this is the macro level story. I move down on a more tactical level. Product first means how do I think about my process and what we do so I have usable design. So the way we are designing an algorithm, our data, or even our BI app, is it usable for the user? On the other side of product as interface has to do with composability, has to do with are we really thinking carefully now of how we have built this? How do we build this modular? How do we organize this modular? If I take this story now all the way down to the operational level, so we start working on and discussing on a level where we actually can do the real work, we're having the 3 dimensions of usage, productization, and composition. And the idea here is that any team, if it's a tech team, if it's sort of in the back end, if it's a domain team, or even if it's a process in operations, every team in a big corporation, I propose, need to think about usage. Who are we doing this for? What value are we creating and contributing with? How do we productize ourselves? How do we think in such a way that it's easier to adopt us? And how do we productize ourselves going back? How do we compose our organization so it basically has a good fit for what we are trying to do? What I'm proposing here is basically trying to get the mechanics into product-first ways of working. And basically, what we're dealing with here is a value productization loop. I will decompose this a bit, but these usage, productization, and composition, they interrelate. They feed off each other. The tricky part in a large organization is that you have HR will compose organization over here. The designers in marketing will compose usage over here, and the people building tech and building operations in the middle. And we have a problem when this loop doesn't happen in a good way. So let's look at value productization loop in use. What do I mean with this? Well, if you go this way, it always starts in the domain. It starts with the usage. It starts with the problem we are solving. We have a problem space. We explore, we validate, discover, define. We diverge. We're trying to really understand what the problem is. Then we close this first loop. We do the develop and deliver. We explore the solution space, and we validate that. Here now we have the first loop. It's a normal double diamond, method in design thinking. Quite interesting, if you talk about domain-driven design as a software development methodology, it's essentially the same thing. We've seen this before. What's the third loop? The third loop has all to do with the organization space. So when you come from, you have thought about what you're gonna, problem you're solving, what you're gonna solve, what you're gonna build, then you need to understand how will I organize this? How will I organize the tech, the architecture, but essentially the team and the team organization. And the core topic here is that this is ultimately a triple loop in the mind. So what is the use of this? So here we have now, on the one hand side, if we go all the way in the triple loop, from discovering continuous value, we're always starting with the value we are trying to understand, to continuously understanding how does that impact our design, and from design, how do we decompose that into organization, into teams, into tech, into architecture. So there is a very clear path here from continuous value to continuous design to continuous organization. So this is the market agility part through continuous adaptation. If I flip it and look at the other way around, what we have now when we are building more and more stuff in a way that is reusable, when we constantly think about how we organize stuff, what should be in the platform team, what should be in the domain team, what type of features can I have in a platform team where I can serve many domain customers, and then in the domain, etc., etc. Continuously understanding that we're building innovation capital in this way. We're building an opportunity to then use that to actually derive new products, new business. It's very simple. The more data we have organized that we can use, the more algorithms we have organized for a use, the distance to create new value on top of that is compounding. So bottom line, what we're getting to then is trying to sort out how to think to balance and work towards market adoption and working towards capitalization. How to work on value creation and value capture. So what I have done now here is trying to have a conversation on the mechanics that we need to go towards. But this is hard. This is extremely hard. I put to you why this is hard in some companies. You can find quite easily by looking at the trajectory of a tech startup. If I take Spotify as one example, versus a large enterprise. I can take Scania, I can take Vattenfall, I can even take many different companies that has a proud analog history. In a proud analog history, with a proud analog history, there is more of this. We have process, we have projects. We have not really structured our funding, our organization, our way of thinking with a product mindset. So when we come out and we say, oh, I want bucket funding for my product team. What do you mean products? We are building data projects. You know, you have an initiative, and we have thousands of initiatives, and we are trying to manage this. So this is really, really hard. I have an anecdote right now on the value productization loop in practice. So right now, with one of Dairdux clients, we've been working with a data strategy. We've been working on something that is essentially a very new context, a new company is being formed with new situation on how we need to meet the market. and essentially how to serve a much larger market and a much larger scope in terms of serving one brand to serving many brands. When we did this work, we were trying to really nail what are the no regrets use cases, what are the things in usage that we really need to have in place when we go live with this new company. And then from here, trying to sort out architecture, you know, all this. When we have come a far way, then you start sequencing how do we organize this in terms of what to build first, and if we're going to build this first, what is the team composition we need? So I have a very experience right here and now that has been very much in a very short period of time trying to get this done. But what we all realize, the mind trick, the hard part here is that we realize, who works on this on quite more tactical and operational level, that we will continue to do this story over and over again. And we now need to explain that to the board. We need to explain to the board that we cannot set this organization, it's going to be done. Then we're going to have a too fat organization for the big future. How do we start? How do we think big, start small, scale fast? So these mechanisms, I think, is really crucial to get right. End note on decentralization. So the key theme here has been how we decentralize data and AI value creation. I've highlighted product-first thinking to emphasize how we build interfaces and how we now, with the value productization loop thinking, a triple diamond, so to speak, how we can think about that. In reality, decentralization is super hard. So the question is, do we have a choice? You know, can we live with only point solutions? I don't think so. Can we truly live in a monolith, in a central platform? I don't think so, because we have ecosystems evolving. So depending on how you look at it, we have a central system. We are the system. Well, you're the ERP system. That's just one part of the company. We are the central system. What are you talking about? This is the cloud system. You're only doing OLAP. OLTP was over here. All right, so we have two monoliths, whether we like it or not. And then we have point solutions because we can't do everything in those platforms, or it doesn't work that way. So decentralization is hard. A core mistake we're doing with decentralization, I've heard it when we talk about data mesh. When we talk about data mesh, we put a large emphasis on we are domain teams and we are decentralizing and we are talking about that. But there's one very important principle here, which is really about the platform teams, serving the domain teams. Product-first ways of thinking, understanding decentralization, understanding maybe the federation part even more, I think is one of the key things to reflect over, and that is what we mean with decentralized data and AI value creation. With this, I want to end these opening remarks